Hello and welcome to the Human Resource. My name is Pandy Pridemore and you are watching us from the ICRC station located in Cincinnati, Ohio. Yes, I know who you're all looking at. You're all looking at this guy, one of our standard attendees.
That's intimidating, I just want to say.
I got him back, guys, for one of his favorite subjects, of course. But Karl Ulrich is here from Sibley, Shillitoe, and Dyer. And he did smile when he came around the corner. and like always, we said, what do you want to talk about today? I got you here. What do you want to talk about? But that was an easy conversation to have because the topic I kind of baited him with is...
Baited me with...
Well...
It's true. That's the way it works.
It's one that I'm a little concerned with, and he is the perfect person to talk about this with me. But has anyone out there been thinking about the election coming up in November?
There's an election coming up in November?
Oh, my gosh. Of course, none of us watch the news because we hate the news. No. But when it comes to our work environment, when it comes to the work life that we all have to live, what have any of you really been thinking about what we're going to do with the conversations of the politics that are going on right now? And, you know, what really got me thinking was, you know, companies have dress codes, Karl, but where are our limitations, or where's the line in the sand when we get a group of individuals who are insisting on wearing their particular ball caps,
right,
and their red T-shirts, and
right.
You know, this? I'm thinking that maybe businesses should be thinking about this now.
Right. Well, it comes up, and the closer we get to the election, the more it's going to come up. I think. We start with the usual policies and procedures, right? Every employer has policies and procedures, dress codes. Work well and play well with others in the workplace. Behavioral standards everybody has to adhere to. So those are the starting point typically. Most private employers, and again, a lot of what I'm going to say depends on where you are, right? Which state you happen to be in, but the vast majority of jurisdictions, private employers, can regulate or permit political speech in the workplace to the degree that they choose. Or they can restrict it to the degree that they choose. There are no constitutional protections necessarily at play over private employment. It's very different if you're a public employer, if you're a government entity employing then constitutional provisions, the protection of free speech, all that stuff kicks in. But constitutionally, at least, the starting point is for private employers, you can pretty much set your standards based upon business necessity. You can either admit it, allow it, or regulate it, depending on how you feel it's appropriate in your workplace.
Well, then where do they start? Because we're always telling them, are you checking your handbook? When was the last time you updated your handbook? Mm-hmm. And if they put it in print, that's what they have to follow. I mean, they have to do what they say they're going to do. But starting tomorrow, what should they be looking at? You know,
I think from my perspective, I'm a management labor side guy, right? So from my perspective as an employer myself, I would say you start with the first consideration of any business is to be able to have a business that runs efficiently and smoothly, which means that the employees have to be able to work together, work well together, have to be able to talk with each other in a professional, in a business-like way without getting into conflict, God forbid, violence. In other words, they have to get along, they have to work, they have to be able to function. They don't have to necessarily agree with everything. The question to me is, it's not about getting agreement with everyone, getting consensus around a particular issue or topic, but it's how you agree or how you disagree, how you interact with people that matters, and that's what affects the business. And so that's where you start, it seems to me. And to the extent that any political speech, political disagreement, political discussion sort of boils over into disruptive behavior, God forbid, worse than that, violence, which hopefully it never happens, but it can. that's when you begin to see problems. And so I think employers start with the notion that the business comes first, the business work and the culture and necessary work environment comes first, and that's what you regulate.
And I love the way you stated that work environment, because when you say that, I'm thinking of the cubicles or the little work areas that people are in. And I remember years ago, and I think I can say this on air, but I remember Hillary Clinton signs
Yeah.
in offices.
Sure. Yeah.
And very specific promotion of candidates. And that all falls into what you're talking about in terms of policy, setting the stage.
Right. I know of many employers that have said, look, you can advocate for whatever position you want, for whatever candidate you wish outside of the workplace. You can hold whatever political views. That's entirely up to you. Outside of the workplace, that's your time. But when you're in the workplace, we want that workplace to be apolitical, meaning we want that workplace to be focused on work, not needlessly confrontational. And sometimes even signs, sometimes T-shirts, caps, whatever can be needlessly confrontational. Now, private employers can say, no, we're not going to allow that. They can allow it if they choose to. They have a fair degree of room. But again, I think for employers to consider how to deal with this, they start with knowing their own workforce, knowing their tolerance for disagreement within the workplace and how it affects getting the work product done, getting the work done, getting the work product, the products out the door, whatever it is. How does it affect the productivity of the business? And that's a judgment call. That's a management call. And that will dictate to some extent how deeply you want to regulate or restrict any of that behavior.
And I know I started the conversation with politics, but right now here it's June of 2024. We are still seeing a lot of disrest on other particular movements and passions that are going into workplaces, maybe not in a very favorable fashion, but how does an employer address the workforce with these kind of topics?
Well, I think the starting point is always it's about the work. It's about the business of the business of the employer, making sure that we create an environment which is most effective and productive for everybody and meaningful for everybody. That means that, maybe you say, look, I don't care if you talk about politics in the parking lot. Maybe I don't care if you attend a protest on Saturday or Sunday or whatever it is. I don't care if you work, for a particular politician or candidate polling or canvassing in the neighborhoods. But when you're at work, you're here to work. And now there are some exceptions to what employers can do. And there are times when, advocating for public policies affecting the terms and conditions of employment. So I'm really in favor of a higher minimum wage, let's say, or I really have some major concerns about how my employer is, handling a particular vacation policy or something like that. Those are things that are specifically related to the terms and conditions of employment. Advocacy in those areas, usually with other employees, is protected legally under the National Labor Relations Act. So you carve out some exceptions to this behavior. But when we're talking generally about political speech, I think the employer always has to start with thinking about their workforce, thinking about what work is done, the degree to which this kind of disagreement, discussion would be disruptive in the workplace.
I'm going to take you down a real difficult road, but they need to hear it from you. What direction should an employer take when it's individuals showing things on social media of their political orientation or of their opinions and maybe their belief systems that are contrary or viewed by the employer as being detrimental or damaging or, and that comes up. I get it all the time, but I don't know that we've ever really talked about it on the show, and I think the viewers need to hear or see this.
Boy, really complicated question, and it's a great question. So, for instance, what can an employer do if it sees let's say a supervisor sees something on an employee post that on Facebook or
Yes.
Even LinkedIn or whatever, which that supervisor or the company doesn't necessarily agree with? Let's say it's a political issue or a political position. When I talk about private employers, we're really talking about, for the most part, an environment which is really pretty unregulated, meaning it is in an at-will employment context left for the employer to decide in its own judgment what is and isn't detrimental to the business. So there's a fair amount of latitude in most places to take action if they choose to do so. Is it a good idea? Maybe not. Is it legal? Yeah, probably. Now, there are some exceptions to that. There are certain states, for example. We're not talking about Constitution here, because none of this is constitutionally stated, constitutionally protected, at least for private employment is concerned, as far as that is concerned. But there are some states that do restrict what an employer can do against an employee for that employee's private out-of-work conduct. Not every state regulates that, but some states do, and it's becoming more common. So places like New York. Connecticut, for example, has a law, not constitutionally mandated necessarily, but it's a law which protects out-of-work political activity and some political speech in ways that we don't have here in Ohio, for example, or in other contiguous states in this area of the Midwest. So there are some jurisdictions in the country which do regulate that. So you really need to be aware of where your employers are working and where those employees are situated and what laws apply. But for the most part, even in this situation, if you're in a place like Ohio, for example, and you just don't like something that an employee has put on the internet, there's nothing necessarily illegal about taking action against that employee, subject to certain restrictions. Again, very complicated set of laws there. Overall, I would say be cautious, because there may be reasons why that out-of-work comment or that post on Facebook might be problematic for other legal reasons. But employers can always protect their trade secrets, right? They can always act to protect their legitimate business interests. That's always been the case and still is, even with respect to social media. It becomes harder to think about those things, though, when you're dealing with just a political opinion or an activism or a protest or something like that on social media. It doesn't necessarily affect the workforce or the workplace, but it may reflect upon the employer. So they have to be very careful how they look at that. And again, I think it's always good practice not to rush to judgment. As an employer, I think you want to take a step back before taking action. If you see something on the internet, on Facebook, on social media that you don't like from one of your employees, take a step back, consider it more carefully, and then weigh the options carefully before rushing to judgment. I think that's extremely important.
Well, I think what you're basically saying is don't allow your emotions to dictate your reaction.
Again, you're setting it better than I am, but yeah, that's I think it's always a good idea in the world of human resources.
And the bottom line is politics really don't have a place in the workforce unless very, very special circumstances. And these topics that we talk about are recommended by you, the viewer, or you, the listener. So if you have a concern and you'd like Karl to address it, please reach out to him, Karl Ulrich at Sibley's, Shillitoe and Dyer, or just let us know here at the station. Contact me, and we will definitely make sure that you get the answers you need. Stay with us because Karl's going to be with us next week for the next topic. Hope to see you then.